A school shooting in Michigan leaves the country grieving, sparking more questions about gun policy. Russia moves troops to the Ukrainian border, and the United States implements a diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Beijing Olympics. Joining us from the left, Patrick Healy, and from the right, Aedan Yohannan. And I'm your moderator, Jessica Nix. From the GWTV studios in Washington, D.C., this is Capital Crossfire. In Michigan, a school shooting left 4 dead. The 15-year-old gunman used a handgun that was a gift from his parents and stored unlocked in the parents' bedroom. The tragedy has resurrected the gun policy debate in the country and brings up questions of whether the parents are culpable for the shooting. Our panel is here to discuss that and more. On the left, Patrick Healy, a junior from Richmond, Virginia, majoring in political science. On the right, Aedan Yohannan, a sophomore from Malvern, Pennsylvania. Aedan is majoring in international affairs and Chinese and is the current GW College Republicans marketing director. Thank you both for joining us today. In a Detroit suburb, 15-year-old Ethan Crumbley fired 30 rounds at Oxford High School on November 30th. 4 students died and 7 others were injured. Ethan is facing terrorism, murder, assault, and weapons charges and will be tried as an adult. The prosecutor for the case has charged both parents with involuntary manslaughter because they allowed their son to have access to the gun and ignored warning signs. Parents are rarely charged in mass shooting cases, making this case an interesting precedent. Aedan, we're going to start this debate with you. What precedent does charging the parents for the crimes that their children commit, set, and how can we see future school shooting cases play out?
Well, obviously this means that parents can now be held responsible if their child commits a school shooting, and if the gun, if it is the parent's gun and it's not stored properly, this could lead prosecutors to go after parents as a way to deter parents from allowing their children to go unchecked in their thoughts, like Ethan Crumbley. And I'm not particularly fond of this precedent. I definitely think it's coming. I think this particular prosecutor is aggressive in her style. But I definitely think going forward, future school shootings, a lot of which are used are with guns used or with used guns that the parents own. I think a lot of those cases will now fall on the parents, like this one.
So Patrick, since charging parents is so rare, what message is this prosecution sending?
I think the message the prosecution is sending is that parents are responsible for their children. Let's look at the facts of what happened. Ethan's parents were brought in on the day of the shooting. They were told that their son had been doodling weapons. He'd been searching for ammunition on his phone during class. He had shown a lot of the things that we would classify as red flags, and the parents decided not even to search his backpack to see if he had a firearm that day that he'd been given as an early Christmas present. Parents are responsible for their actions, and in this case, the parents failed miserably. So I think that the prosecutor in Michigan is doing exactly the right thing. If you're not going to exercise responsibility in how you handle firearms in your own home, and then if 4 people die as a result of that negligence, then you can be held responsible. So I think the precedent being set here is that parents are responsible for their children, full stop.
In Michigan, there are no laws requiring a firearm to be locked away. In 2020, there was a bill that introduced in the state legislature for Michigan for safe storage, but the bill stalled. A 2005 federal law requires gun manufacturers and dealers to include a device to store the handgun, but the law does not require the device to actually be used. Other popular proposals for gun legislation include universal background checks and implementing red flag laws, which would allow police officers or family members to petition a state court to temporarily remove a firearm from someone who poses a danger to themselves or others. So Aedan, at what point, if ever, will Congress take up popular legislation like universal background checks and red flag laws? And will a lockup law become a state law issue, or will this be added to the docket for federal legislation?
I think Congress definitely wants to, but with the filibuster, I don't see it ever really going through. The thing about it, I do think it's going to become more of an issue going to the states. I think like Michigan, might rethink it, but the fact of the matter is that universal background checks, red flag laws, these aren't going to stop this from happening. This is really an issue that the public schools failed on, because, as Patrick was saying, they knew that he was doodling these terrible drawings, and they knew that he was Googling about ammunition, and they failed to do anything. They didn't even search his backpack. And so this legislation can come through. It probably won't come through at the federal level, but in the end, it's not going to be effective.
So, Patrick, can we see movement in Congress on universal background checks, federal red flag laws, or even lockup laws, or is this just going to be a state issue?
I will agree with my opponent. I think that it has an uphill battle considering the size of majorities that Democrats have in Congress and because of the impediments of the filibuster. But I don't think that's going to stop states from acting. In my home state of Virginia, there's been progress on the issue of gun violence in the past 2 years since Democrats took control of the General Assembly. I think that a lot of states already that have the will to do it have already introduced protections. But I want to go back to something my opponent said. When it comes to these red flag laws, Ethan exhibited what are considered red flags. He was doodling, talking about ammunition, and all these things. That is the definition of a red flag, and nobody acted on it. And that's exactly why things like red flag laws, things like universal background checks do need to be discussed at the federal level, because it's a public safety issue. We're the only country in the world where students on a regular basis are shot to death in their schools. So there needs to be a conversation about whether we need to change our institutions in order to get important legislation passed to protect people's lives.
And that's going to wrap up our first topic. When we come back, our panel will dive into Russia and Ukraine. Stay with us.
Universities like George Washington play a critical role in hosting debate and discourse on events of the day.
The right answer is not to refuse the other. The right answer is not to say, get rid of this religion. It's not part of us. It's wrong.
I think that the story of America is the story of race. So when I think of the questions that I'm asking or the stories that I'm going to write, I'm thinking, okay, well, what are we learning about our country?
Well, I think the likelihood of him being indicted is close to 100%. There was a lot of hurdles that had to be cleared in order for that to happen.
One of the reasons that Donald Trump is president is because there is such a frustration with the way that Washington functions.
Sympathy is one thing, but empathy is the language of recovery, and it's something that's, without a doubt, instilled into every person that's in recovery.
It's never lead with the positive, it's always lead with the perceived negative.
Well, that is part of the problem. I mean, I actually would agree with you on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. One of the things that we have seen that is most under siege in this country is the notion of civil discourse, and we here at GW, among other things, very much want to stand for that.
This is truly an only at GW moment.
Russia has drawn plans to send 175,000 troops to the Ukrainian border, escalating tensions between the two countries in this slow-moving border war. President Joe Biden and President Vladimir Putin held a 2-hour-long video call where Biden asserted the United States' support for Ukrainian sovereignty and territory. Putin claims Americans and Western European allies are instigating the war through security threats to Russia and NATO exercises in the Black Sea. In 2008, NATO promised Ukraine membership without details for how or when, which Putin sees as a threat to Russia. Since Ukraine is not a core member of NATO, it does not benefit from NATO's core principle of collective defense, which means an attack on one ally is an attack on all allies. So, Patrick, we're going to start this discussion with you. What role will NATO play in the possible Russian invasion of Ukraine, and should they extend collective defense protections?
Well, I think the specific role of what NATO is going to do is still a bit murky, but I will say, yes, they should extend collective defense protections. We should all in liberal democracies across Europe and in the United States and in NATO should be supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and their right to self-determination. They are a sovereign country. They can make their own decisions. They repudiated a pro-Russian president in the 2014 elections. They've made it very clear that they don't see their future as being aligned in Russia's borders. So I think that NATO should respect the wishes of the Ukrainian people, which is to remain sovereign and independent.
So, Aedan, what is NATO's role in a possible Russian invasion?
Well, I completely disagree. I don't think including Ukraine in NATO is a good idea at all. I think that'll only anger the Russians. And NATO's role in a Russian invasion, obviously NATO, the whole reason NATO exists at this point is to counter Russia, but to escalate a conflict like that and implicate the United States is reckless. It's not in the U.S.'s interest to enable NATO to fight this conflict if it ends up materializing.
So Aedan, with or without NATO, is Ukraine prepared for a potential invasion with 175,000 Russian troops expected to be on the border at the beginning of 2022? And what would the United States or Europe's responsibility be?
Well, Ukraine is unfortunately not prepared. I think Russia would walk all over them. The United States' responsibility. The United States has no responsibility to Ukraine. They're not in NATO, and they're not a strategic ally in any sense. I understand. Patrick said they're a liberal democracy, but that doesn't mean that we risk conflict, a great power conflict with Russia, just because we want to defend another liberal democracy. We have to put American interests first and American security first. And fighting a war for Ukraine is not in the interest of the American people.
So Patrick, does the U.S. or Europe have a responsibility in this war?
Yeah, it has a responsibility to try to prevent this from escalating into war. If we get there, though, obviously Ukraine needs to be defended, because otherwise if the U.S. just bends over and lets Russia do whatever it wants, what message does it send to Putin into Russia? The message it sends to Putin in Russia, if we don't get involved and if we don't stand strong, is, well, who's to say he can't go after other parts of Eastern Europe? Who's to say he won't go after Poland or other American allies, and also places where we have deep strategic interests invested? It's not just a matter of defending liberal democracy, it's also a matter of national interest and our national security, because eventually if Russia thinks they can provoke Ukraine, they think they can provoke us even more aggressively. I don't think that anyone should want war. I think we need to look at measures such as economic sanctions and other measures to make clear to Putin there will be consequences. But if Putin decides to escalate, that needs to be responded to appropriately.
So from a video call between Biden and Putin, Biden promised severe economic sanctions if Russia invades. So Patrick, are sanctions or the threat of sanctions enough to deter Russia?
To answer the question, no, I don't think so. Otherwise it would have worked in 2014 when they annexed Crimea from Ukraine. And when Russia's been sanctioned on several other occasions, most notably comes to mind is the case of Alexei Navalny, when sanctions were imposed, consequences were put onto Russia's economy after they tried to poison the opposition leader in Russia. So I don't think that Putin really seems to care much about sanctions, but Biden's saying that they're willing to go to much more extreme measures on that front than before. So we have to see what the White House proposes.
So Aedan, same question. Are sanctions enough action, or what else should Biden do?
Sanctions, probably not. I don't see them. It's really it's a mild slap in the face to Russia. I don't think that'll really deter them from invading Ukraine. But at the end of the day, this isn't Biden's responsibility, and this isn't America's responsibility. This is Ukraine's responsibility, and it's not worth the risk to fight this war for Ukraine. I understand that deterrence plays a role, but the risk of deterring Russia and it not working, and we get into a conflict, that is something unimaginable. I don't think war with Russia would be good for anyone. I don't think the appetite for war in this country has ever been lower, especially coming out of Afghanistan. So I think Biden should negotiate, and I think they should try to come to a deal with Russia. I think they should go to the try to talk it out, but obviously that's optimistic. And going forward, I think the U.S. should ensure that it doesn't get itself embroiled in another conflict halfway across the world.
And that will be the last word on our discussion of Ukraine and Russia. When we come back, news from China and the Olympics.
Hi, Colonials. Did you know there are hundreds of ways for you to volunteer with GW? Each year, over 1,500 alumni, parents, and friends contribute thousands of hours to make our community stronger. There are countless ways you can volunteer, so it's easy to choose an opportunity that is most meaningful to you, like connecting with students and alumni based on your student involvement, identity, or personal interests, getting involved with your local alumni network, mentoring a current student via our online mentoring platform, connecting with prospective students through undergraduate admissions opportunities, serving on an industry network leadership council, becoming a social media ambassador. The list goes on. No matter where you are in the world or how much time you have to give, you can connect and volunteer with GW. And the best part, it's easy to get involved. Just visit alumni.gwu.edu/volunteer to learn more about these and other opportunities. Because of your service to GW, you are able to make a direct impact on the lives of former, current, and future students. We look forward to working with you. Raise high.
Continuing our discussion abroad, the United States announced a diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, citing China's human rights violations. Athletes will still attend the games, but no diplomatic representatives will be present. Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia have joined the United States. China said the United States would, quote, pay a price for the decision, but provided no details. Aedan, we're going to go to you first. What message does the U.S. opting out send to other participating nations, especially now that Australia, the United Kingdom, and Canada have joined this diplomatic boycott? Well,
the message they're trying to send is that they don't tolerate China's behavior. I don't think this is it's a very performative way of doing so. I don't think the Chinese really care. But what they're really conveying is that they'll stand together, especially these other countries that have joined the UK, Australia, that they'll stand together against China, and it's mostly symbolic. But the message is we're displeased with your behavior, and we're not going to show you the same legitimacy that we would show to other countries.
Patrick, I'm going to give you the same question. So what message does the U.S. opting out, along with these other countries, send to China?
I think the message it's sending is that we have a fundamental problem with the human rights abuses, especially against Uyghur Muslims in the Xinjiang province. I agree with Aedan. It's very symbolic. I don't think it's going to make a difference. I also think that the threat of us paying a price is pretty empty rhetoric. I think it's just China trying to save face and try to avoid having, I guess, egg on their faces back home. But I think that in this case, it's going to do very little to change anything, because we're still sending our athletes. So are all these other countries. It's really just a very minimal measure. If the U.S. was actually serious about the human rights issue, we'd get more aggressive in saying that we're not going to accept goods that are produced with labor from Uyghur camps, people that are being held against their will. There are much more effective measures that could be used to actually tell China we're serious about this issue. So I think it's a pretty empty gesture.
The United States hosted a democracy summit recently aimed at promoting the importance of free and fair elections and introducing new initiatives to fight corruption. The Biden administration invited Taiwan explicitly. Taiwan and China have a tense history over whether or not Taiwan is a sovereign nation or a province of China. So, Patrick, does Taiwan's participation in Biden's democracy summit signal that the administration is willing to take a more aggressive stance against China?
I think that the only signal it sends is that the U.S. still stands for democracy so long as Biden is in charge and running the show. I think that it's very interesting that he did put Taiwan in, but excluded other democracies such as Hungary and other places from this summit. I think it's Biden trying to send a message that no matter where people are, if someone tries to pose a threat to democracy, the U.S. will be there to stand firm in favor of those principles. I think that that's what the stance is all about. I don't think it's necessarily aimed at China, but I can understand why the Chinese would be worried about it.
So, Aedan, given the diplomatic boycott and Taiwan's invitation to the summit, is this showing that the Biden administration is becoming tougher on China, or is there more to be done?
I think the Biden administration is definitely trying to up its game on China. I think in terms of Taiwan, Biden is relatively pro-Taiwan. He's called the relationship that the U.S. has with them rock solid. but he's still kind of maintained the same one China policy that we've had for a while. But is there more to be done? You know, it's tough to say. The actions of the Chinese in terms of trade are definitely something that needs to be addressed, and I think Biden has maintained a lot of the Trump era trade deals or trade policy because he understands that. But in terms of approaching China more aggressively, which is kind of the implication here, I don't think there's much more that can be done.
So that's going to wrap up our debate. When we come back, rapid fire. Stay with us.
All right, we'll be ready in about 5 minutes.
I'll be ready. While these guys finish up, I got a few things I want to show you. Come with me. Over the summer, we gave a lot of things a new fresh coat of paint and a new look, including the Vern Shuttle Express. Take a look at this. Oh, there you are. I thought I'd lost you. Come on with me. I want to show you the new all-you-can-eat dining option out at the Mount Vernon campus. Hey, I can charge my phone in here. I'm stuffed. You got to try the mac and cheese. It's great. I got one more stop to make. I got to get my gear for the year. Let's go to the bookstore. You can't have too many GW ties. You need to get out in your buff and blue. I want to see at all the events and the games, raising GW high. One of the things I heard from a lot of our students is we need more community space, a place to eat, study, hang out with friends. Like this one. This is one of our new spaces. We need to get going. Got to get back. This is going to be an exciting year.
And action.
Welcome back.
Our panel now joins us for rapid fire, some quick answers to some quick questions. A new COVID-19 variant was discovered in South Africa. While the origins of the Omicron variant are largely unknown, a rise in COVID cases is expected. Pfizer recently announced 2 shots plus a booster will neutralize the Omicron variant and prevent severe disease. In New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio mandated all private sector employers must require their employees to get vaccinated, with no option for regular testing for unvaccinated employees. Patrick, I'm going to go to you first. Should this requirement for private employers be a decision at the federal, state, or city level, or should it be left up to the employers?
Well, I mean, I think all of us have the undergirding principle that we don't want lockdowns again. So I think that the federal government does need to intervene and say that people need to get vaccinated if they want to go to work, if they want to send their kids to school, if they want to let their children go to daycare, if they want to be able to maintain the quality of life they have right now, they need to be vaccinated, because it's not just a matter of personal choice anymore. It's now about public safety. It's about the health of others and making sure that our communities are safe. So I think that there needs to be a conversation about whether the federal government should intervene, because the states, several states, Florida and Texas come to mind, that don't seem to take an interest in making sure that people aren't getting sick and aren't taking the proper measures to make sure that people are being incentivized to get vaccinated in order to get to herd immunity and stop the spread of the virus. Because if enough people are vaccinated, these new variants will stop forming, the mutations will stop happening, and we'll finally be able to get back to normalcy if everyone does their part.
So Aedan, I'm going to give you the same question. Is this going to be left up to, or should this be left up to businesses, or is it left up to the government?
This should be left up to businesses. I understand Patrick supports vaccine mandate at the federal level, and I think this is just a terrible idea. I don't think the public health risks of Omicron and the Delta variants and all the variants coming out, I don't think it justifies keeping unvaccinated kids out of school or keeping parents from going to work. It's an overstep, and I don't see the justification for it. The fact of the matter is that Omicron, it's more transmissible, but it's less deadly, and it's a pipe dream to ever think that we're going to vaccinate enough of the country fast enough and keep up with the variants to get rid of COVID. It's endemic, and we're going to have to, unfortunately, to learn to live with it. So keeping people out of work, keeping people out of school, I don't think it's a very strong way to really rally the public and move forward.
Patrick, you're looking like you want to jump in.
Yeah, I want to jump in. Well, I mean, we're not going to beat COVID with that mindset. I think that what this country needs is it needs to do what needs to be done, and hard decisions need to be taken for the public good and for the safety of others. And I think there needs to be a conversation about, like, not just about personal choice, but about public safety. It is a public safety issue. It's a public health issue. If unvaccinated people go into the workplace, we now can have cases that break through the vaccines and get people sick. If someone is immunocompromised, or if someone is battling cancer, or is battling a tough medical condition in the workplace and they don't know someone around them isn't vaccinated, they could be unknowingly exposed to illness and they could die. This isn't just about the individual, this is about the community, and we need to take substantive action to combat this.
Well, there's no evidence that Omicron it breaks through the vaccine. Maybe there's a new variant that does. I don't think that alone justifies firing people from their jobs. You mentioned this case where people are at work and they're immunocompromised. There are other measures that can be taken to protect these people. It doesn't have to be mandatory vaccines for everybody. It could be regular testing. It could be work from home. There's a lot of different options here that don't include firing people because they didn't make a medical decision that the government told them to.
So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next question. January 6th commission submitted over 100 subpoenas for phone records for Trump officials and associates, including his chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Investigators believe this information will help the commission piece together communications from those within Trump's inner circle and the organizers of the Stop the Steal rally. Meadows provided emails and text messages, but has since sued House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and members of the committee. Meadows is refusing to answer questions or sit before the committee after voluntarily giving information. So Aedan, with the committee seemingly making strides in obtaining information from the day, what does this lawsuit from Meadows mean after he voluntarily gave information? Is it a blatant attempt to slow down the commission to reflect a more unified Republican Party?
I think that's definitely one takeaway. It is interesting what Meadows did. He was definitely a very high-ranking official in the Trump administration. So it does reflect poorly, but going forward, I don't think the commission will find anything too groundbreaking. I think a unified Republican Party is likely to maintain some sort of the Trump energy that day represented, even though there is an investigation.
Patrick, same question. Is Meadows trying to present a more unified Republican Party ahead of the 2022 midterms?
No, I think that Mark Meadows is actually scared for his own well-being. I think that's why he's behaving the way he is. I think that Mark Meadows didn't realize what he was getting himself into, and I think he's now starting to regret that. Let's just look at what's been reported. There's been reports now that we have that the commission now has Mark Meadows' text messages, his emails, his communications from January 6th, and then as soon as that story broke, Mark Meadows has taken the action he's taken. I think we need to see what the committee finds in those communications, because let's remember, Mark Meadows was President Trump's right-hand man at the time of the insurrection on January 6th. If anyone in that White House besides President Trump's family knew what he was up to and how he was acting, it would have been the chief of staff. And so I think that there needs to be a substantive conversation about what Mark Meadows does know and what he's hiding. I think that the tactic of suing Nancy Pelosi is really just performative. It's him trying to show that he's not totally selling out. I think it's also important to note that him suing the committee isn't going to change the way the committee is behaving. I think it's him getting desperate, and I think he's running scared.
And that will be the last word. Well, that wraps up our last Capital Crossfire debate of the semester. Aedan, Yohannan, and Patrick Healy, thank you for this lively debate and for coming on the show. When we come back, Willow Hasson has your fact check.
Raise high. This isn't just our battle cry. It's our call, our challenge. Because when you were called to Washington, you were called to higher expectations, to a higher standard, We are called here to advance knowledge, to serve society, to change the world. Is that too lofty? Too aspirational? Is it simply too much to expect? Not if your classroom is a Smithsonian, the IMF, or on the doorstep of the Supreme Court. Not if you have access to the most hallowed institutions and formidable leaders. Not if you are given the tools to change minds, shape laws, influence entire fields of study, advance our way of life, change the course of history. From the nation's capital to the four corners of the earth, to far below the surface and far beyond our atmosphere. Here, unique opportunities, the ones that many people work much of their lives to get, are within your reach from the moment you arrive. This is where you find new pathways for preventing global epidemics, where your unexpected friend propels a new scientific movement forward. This is where you push forward as a team to break records and reach new heights. Where your classroom is 68 square miles of the most consequential land on Earth. This is where you will make it happen. This is the George Washington University, and what we make is history. So stand up, be bold, take risks, press on, push harder, raise high.
Welcome back. During our panel discussion, a team of fact-checkers monitored our debate. Willow Hasson is here to tell us what we missed. Willow?
Thanks, Jessica. Our debaters came prepared for today's debate with few errors. However, some clarifications need to be made. Democrat Patrick Healy stated that the United States is the only country that experiences mass school shootings. To clarify, although other countries experience school shootings, the number within the U.S. since 2009 is 57 times as many shootings as the other 6 G7 countries, including Canada, Japan, Germany, Italy, France, the UK, all combined. Republican Aedan Yohannan said that the reason NATO exists is to counter Russia. It is true that NATO was founded to counter the Soviet Union, but today, according to NATO itself, the purpose includes broader goals to promote democratic values, enable members to consult and cooperate on defense and security-related issues, build trust, and in the long run, prevent conflict. It has broader goals than simply countering Russian influence. And that's all for the Fact Check team. Back to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Willow. Well, that's all for this final episode of Capital Crossfire from this semester. A big thank you to our executive producers, Eva Grossman and Kate Waters, who will both be leaving us next semester. Congratulations to Kate for graduating, and have fun abroad, Eva. And I'm so excited to announce our new executive producers are Kyle Anderson and Jack Castanoli. So we will see you next semester with our new producers, and congratulations to them. Be sure to check us out online at www.gw-tv.com and follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and like us on Facebook. For all of us at GWTV, I'm Jessica Nix. Thanks for getting caught in the crossfire with us. We'll see you back here next time.